Journey Beyond Imposter Syndrome. This is where I invite you into a space where high achievers and spiritual leaders converge to redefine success and self-worth. By sharing transformative stories and engaging with thought leaders, this podcast serves as a roadmap for navigating the complexities of imposter syndrome. It's an intimate look into overcoming personal barriers tailored for those who value wisdom, leadership, and intuition in business and life. Join me at the Humble Warrior Podcast with Alani Bankhead. Welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Alani Bankhead, and you guys, I'm so excited today to have with me Jen Porter. She's a leadership and empowerment coach. But more importantly, selfishly, Jen is a very special person for me personally. She helped encourage and guide me into a certain employment situation, but also on my way out. And so I'm just really excited to share with you the incredibly bright light that she is today. Her story is so interesting, and I know she's going to encourage you today. So welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast, sister. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Alani. I'm so happy to be here. This is exciting. I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
I know, me too. Okay, we're just going to jump right in. So, can you please share with us a little bit about your story and what is it that you're doing these days? Tell us all the things.
So, the first part of my career, I spent helping companies and nonprofits build strong, effective teams, and that was almost always on the recruiting side. I fell in love with coaching, had been coached myself for many years, and have been able to do things in my life and in my career that I would not have been able to do without the help of my coach. And so I wanted to do that for others. And so
Ooh.
I entered into a program, changed my career 7 years ago, and have been building this new business to help women be more empowered and become radiant leaders doing life-changing work because the world needs more empowered women. So that's how I spend my time these days. I live in Colorado with my husband and our fur babies, and life is good and it's such an adventure, and I'm having a blast doing all of it.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And you guys, she's being very humble. Like, we're getting a very strategic viewpoint on her career, but she has been a bright light and encouragement in so many different ways. And actually, I just want to highlight first and foremost, you mentioned about working with teams in terms of like in maybe an HR capacity or with recruiting, right? And oftentimes society says that elements like HR and recruiting, it's like not that important. It's like this thing you have to have. Of course, you have to have it. But one of the premises of this show and the work that I do is to highlight that what you think is weakness is actually the source of ultimate kind of power and joy. And me having been a former human resources person, like 25 years ago, I understand the power of having a powerful HR and recruiting professional to find the right people and then to ultimately get them into the right spots. So you're like the gel and the glue that held so many teams and organizations together, but you're not at the forefront, right? You're not the face, you're not the CEO. And so I have a special place in my heart for recruiters and HR staff because I just don't know why we don't give more time and attention to the importance of those entities. But guys, Jen is such a powerful leader. And so I'm really excited to dig more into her story. And okay, Jen, you mentioned you completely changed your career. Yes. And so can you share a little bit about what did that process look like? At what point did you decide I need to completely leave what's comfortable and what I know? What did that feel like? What were the steps that you took?
I'll tell you, it was a painful process and a process of uncertainty. So, what was happening for me was I was in my career and things were changing where I was. There were two things that were colliding. Number one, I felt this compulsion to go deeper in coaching. And so I took a big old risk and went into a coaching program, not really knowing what I was going to do with it. I knew it would make me a better leader and coach as I led teams. But beyond that, I really had no aspirations for much more. I didn't know what else was going to come. I was following my heart and my passion in making that big investment of time and money to get that coaching certification.
Uh-oh.
Then the other thing that's happening is in my work, there was a lot of leadership changes. There were a lot of things that were happening within that system that were evolving and changing in a way that wasn't comfortable for me anymore. I wasn't really happy with what was happening. I was starting to get that itch of, I think I want to make a change. I don't know that I want to continue in this place. Even though the work was good and I loved what I was doing and the mission was incredible, the dynamics were becoming very difficult. So in the middle of that coaching program, I got laid off. Now I sensed that this was coming. So in my heart and even in my strategy, I was already preparing for it. But I didn't want to have such a drastic shift, right? And we love to be in control of our decisions and our choices. So that was really hard for me. But what it did was it caused me to say, okay, I have been severed. And so I need to make a change. I know what I'm going to do. And so 2 weeks later, I started my practice. So I registered in the state of Virginia, which is where I lived, and I just started coaching people. I finished up my certification, and that gave me some time to start small. And then once I got that certification, feel a little bit more legitimacy in the business and then really give it my all. Now, I had a bit of a severance package that was, I considered that to be my runway, like a little bit of a cushion so that if things didn't work out in 3 to 6 months, that I could make a different decision and go back into my main career and industry. So that was how the change happened. But I'll tell you, it was scary, but the thing that kept me going was my passion and feeling like this is really my purpose. I just knew it. I knew that I had the skill set. I was a natural coach. I'm a developer of people. I'm incredibly passionate about empowering others. And so those characteristics are really a great fit for coaching. And so I just knew that this was the direction I needed to keep going in. And that helped me overcome the challenges and the uncertainty and the fears that were coming up.
Yes. Oh my gosh. There's so much great stuff in there I want to dig into. I've been taking notes like mad. Okay, so first of all, something that you mentioned that resonates deeply with a lot of people that I work with and that I serve is at your previous employer, you were talking about, I love the work, but things were shifting, and I started to inherently feel like maybe this wasn't the right place for me anymore. And so we often feel a very strong pull to, but the work is so good.
Yeah.
And I don't want to leave the work. And then there's this element of even if I'm not happy or if it no longer feels like a good fit, right? So your gut, your soul, your intuition, whatever you want to call it, is telling you this is no longer the right place for you. So often we want to cling to what we know because we're making it work.
Yeah.
And so, would you mind sharing a little bit of what did that feel like for you to let go of that love for the work and really be able to transition into the life-giving work that you're doing now?
I can remember feeling like having a bodily experience to the discomfort in that environment. And so there were a lot of signs that were pointing to this is not good. Something needs to shift. And when we're in that place, it's hard to know what our next steps are. And you're right, we do cling to comfort and security in quotes. Let me put all those in quotes. Security, the certainty of a paycheck is a big one for people. The benefits, when I worked at Microsoft, we used to call them the velvet handcuffs because it was so good. The benefits were so great. We were paid really well. It's really hard to leave certain situations. And the reputation is another one. If your organization has a great reputation and people want to work there, and you tell them where you work and they're like, wow, that's amazing. That does something, right? It's actually, we take pride in that. So it's hard to walk away from some of those things. I think creating some sort of resourcing ourselves for the transitions is incredibly important. If we were to try to do a big transition by ourselves, anything, whether it's a relationship breakup, whether it's a big move, whether it's a job change, anything that is significant, we do not want to be doing that by ourselves. That's a
Yes.
recipe for self-doubt, the fears that are going to come up with nothing to hold on to. There's no anchors. So we have to resource ourselves when to challenge our thinking, right? Have somebody objective outside of our circles to ask us questions. That often is a coach. That's the reason I reached out to coaches over the time that I've worked with them, is because I wanted somebody to challenge me.
Yes. Yeah.
Get
And
in,
so
like,
I'm sorry to interrupt because
yeah.
that is such a powerful thought right there. And I want to dig into it because a lot of times I hear, but I have people to support me. I have my partner, I have my friends. Why specifically? Because you keep mentioning coaches. Why
Yeah.
did you choose a coach over another type of resource to encourage you?
Here's why, because my friends are biased. It's because my friends and the people who love me around me have something at stake in the decisions that I make. And so they are going to be inherently biased in the decisions. They may not like what I'm choosing. They may not, it may make them feel unsafe. It may trigger them. For example, I've moved around a lot. That's not part of my family's story. And so for me to be moving around to different geographic locations and taking risks and going to other countries and doing volunteer work and all these things, it looked like a very untethered life. But so other people around me were reacting and worried about me. And I'm like, this isn't a crisis. This is me living my life. I'm actually awake. I'm living my life awake.
Yeah.
And so those people in my life, they want to keep me where I am because how it makes them feel.
Yes. Okay. And I love that you said that because that definitely does highlight. Oftentimes, you get resistance from people that we
Yes.
love, and it can often feel like it's us. Like we're like, oh, are we the problem? Because humble warriors are always very introspective. And what part did I play in the situation? How can I be better? That's like the typical mindset of the people that listen to this podcast. And so
Yeah,
when you have a loved one who now we're now understanding is biased because they're invested in the relationship with you, there's nothing wrong with you, but their fear might be a reflection of them.
that's right. That's right.
Yes.
They're filtering it through their own experience and how it's going to impact them. So
Yes.
having an objective person who is unwedded to the outcomes of our decisions, be able to draw out what's in us. That's what my coach did for me, is she was able to ask those questions that I was going to say forced me. It's like invited me to go deep within and start to pull out, what does that mean when you say you're passionate about Africa? What does it mean that you care about widows? What does it mean that, and pulling out these things that I had never really said to anybody because I couldn't make sense of them. I couldn't
Mm.
make those passions form into a story that I could share with somebody where it landed and made sense.
Oh,
But this coach was able to take these pieces and start to put them together so that I could see the puzzle that was being created and the
mm.
tapestry of what I was
Yes.
stepping into, which then gave me meaning and significance for taking these risks.
Yes. And I just want to affirm you and maybe share with the audience because obviously they don't know about our past history in a relationship or maybe all the thoughts that I have about how amazing you are. But hearing you share about, I needed a resource to reflect back to me my potential and help me untangle the thoughts around these dreams and what my intuition was telling me I needed to create. You guys, the Jen I know was always squared away, very confident, gave no indication in any way, shape, or form that she wasn't sure about what she needed to be doing. So to be hearing that this is what was happening inside that Jen brain of, man, there were all these unspoken things, or maybe things I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to bring that to light. And that's something we hear a lot from heart-centered world changers, is what I call them, right? Is they
Love
give and
that.
give, and they're so encouraging to other people. And it's really hard for us to be open to a space where we're receiving the same type of love and support that we give to others. And so for you, coaching was a great resource because it was a completely unbiased space for you to enter into to really explore, what does it mean when I say I want to help people with transition, or that I want to help widows, or that I love Africa, or what does that look like in practice?
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. So speaking of additional tools, because you said earlier, don't do it by yourself. And
Yeah.
so, first, we've talked about challenging thinking in safe spaces through a coach. We've talked about the finances, which we're going to come back to because there's a whole other thing with financial
Right.
transitions. And you mentioned you had, so not doing it by myself. So you had a financial like pillow to land on, or I think you called it an on ramp for
Mhm.
the business, right? And in terms of not doing it by yourself, to get over that gap and bridge it so that you could be successful in what you're doing now, what other resources did you lean on to be able to create this reality and have a successful transition?
So I did lean on friends. In
Okay.
fact, I made the difficult decision to give up my beautiful apartment in an area that I loved because it was so expensive and it wasn't going to give me the foundation that I needed to be able to start a business. So I broke that lease, found somebody to take it over so I wouldn't have to pay the 2 months extra.
Right.
And I moved into a friend's house and she charged me a very small amount just to help her out and to give me the space that I needed to be able to try to build. So that was a big transition that I was making. And a lot, I was willing to change a lot to help me pursue this dream and this goal
I love
and
that.
reducing those expenses. Because realistically, we can't go from six figures to six figures. There's got to be some growth and incubation time to get to that place where you really want to be. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yes. And so I want to highlight something that you said in there in terms of it wasn't just staying with a friend, but you actually created a win for both of you. It sounds, and the
Yep.
win is something that is so magical. I feel like, especially with people that work in compassionate spaces, we're so used to giving, especially as women. The idea of receiving is like almost an allergic reaction in my body. And it's a practice I have to
Mhm.
engage in. But the first time you encounter a win, right? So you made this painful decision to leave this beautiful apartment in this beautiful neighborhood because you had a much bigger picture understanding of what you were working towards. And you knew you had to make that sacrifice in the short term to create your long term vision. And then you partnered with a friend who the win was she gets a little bit of cash in exchange for giving up some space in her house. And you were able to stretch out your finances to create.
Yeah. And there was an amazing connection that happened in sharing space and time and conversation and supporting one another. It was a beautiful experience. And she's one of the ones that I'll be seeing in a couple weeks that I'm so excited to spend a week with.
That is
So
so
those connections
amazing.
matter and that the intimacy comes. And I think I learned receiving when I was going through my divorce because it was such a traumatic experience for me that was where I realized I needed other people in ways that I hadn't before. It's often through suffering that we become connected to other people in ways that wouldn't happen otherwise. So those deep relationships and connections and support, I needed a lot at that time.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
I learned what friendship really looks, and it's always through what I've received in my life where I've seen love modeled that now I'm able to do that for other people.
Oh my goodness, that is so beautiful. So you said through the suffering, we actually do connect with other people. And
Absolutely.
okay, so I love how you're like, yeah, absolutely, 100%, because most people try to avoid suffering at all costs.
One can try, but they're going to
Right.
face it's impossible. None of us are free from suffering in this world.
And so I think what I'm hearing you say is you do your best to live a life of joy and happiness, but we are humans. We're living a human experience. Pain and suffering are a part of that. And we want to control and minimize our suffering, but the suffering in and of itself has its own nuggets to offer in terms
It's
of,
essential.
ooh, tell me more. Tell me
It's
more.
essential. We can't experience joy if we haven't experienced suffering. It's the spectrum of being human and here's what happens when we do shove down the pain, we actually start to numb to the higher emotions too. Happiness, joy, delight. And we can't numb of our emotions, but not all of our emotions.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You
So
guys,
we have to embrace all of life and what it brings to really be able to experience. We have to experience the highs and the lows. Otherwise, we're just going to be numb. We're going to numb out.
yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, we just went like Gen like 5.0 because so I love that your entire energy, if you guys aren't watching the video, she just went to a whole other space of like joy. And we're talking about suffering, okay? Because suffering has so much wisdom tucked into it. And as you were talking about, we can't experience deep joy without deep suffering. It reminded me, I think it's Rumi that said the quote, the wound is the place the light enters. And so I know for me, I've had experiences where I would experience deep suffering at the hands of other people, but also it was like the depth of the stab wound also allowed joy and love and connection and other really powerful emotions to filter in. And I got to discover the depths of my own heart and my own soul. But
Yeah.
also, it reminded me of just how the duality of life and how funny life is. So, for example, in order to get olive oil, which is delicious, you have to crush the grapes. In order to get wine, the vine itself, if it's comfortable, it doesn't produce fruit. So the vintners, like the vine, it has to be punished to
Mhm.
suffer and create that fruit so that we can enjoy wine. There's that, I think it's a Native American proverb that says, you cannot have a rainbow without the rain.
Right.
And so, all these elements of even though there is pain and suffering, there's something beautiful. It's just the opposite side of a different coin.
Mhm.
And so the
Mhm.
question for us becomes for someone who's hearing this and they're at the beginning of this wisdom and they're saying, all I experience is suffering and pain, Jen.
Yeah.
What do I need to do today to be like you and understand and really truly believe that I can actually come out of this a more joyful, better, more powerful, more empowered person?
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you and I just talked about, and just so that the listeners can not misunderstand. It's not that the joy comes in the middle of the suffering. The joy comes after the suffering. So we don't typically experience those things at the same time or even in the same season. And a season can be a lot longer than we would want it to be. Like those grapes, they have to develop across a season before they can produce something absolutely magnificent. So, when people are suffering, and most people are carrying a tremendous amount of pain, it's difficult to access hope, but we have to have hope to help propel us through that pain and suffering so that we don't stay there and get stuck. And where does we have to have some sort of an anchor for our soul?
I love that.
And
And
so for me, that's my faith. Because so I'm a Christian, I have a biblical worldview. I have read the story that we're offered through the scriptures. So I know where we are in the history in the middle of the story, and I know what's coming. And that's what gives me hope that there's purpose in my life. There's meaning to the suffering. We're called to patient endurance through our
yes,
trials. And
yes,
so there's something that awaits us on the other side. And that's the grand story, right? This big overarching story. But
yes.
in the smaller story of our lives, there's this experiencing of this cycle. If we allow ourselves to experience the pain, if we move through the pain and we find ways to heal, then we're going to start to experience the joy that comes from having gone through something significant. We live enough years, we get to see that cycle. And that's where our stories emerge, right? That's where our testimony emerges from, is because we've been through stuff, having lived decades in this life. And then we
Yes.
can have some perspective that, oh, I can remember when I was having that really difficult time, I actually made it through. What did I learn about myself, my resiliency, my strength? What did I learn about my community and who loves me? What did I learn about friendship? And taking all that with me so that when I experience this next really painful season of suffering, I can draw on those same things and remember I actually have what it takes. And there's something greater on the other side of this. This is not the end.
Oh my
This
gosh.
will not last forever.
Yes. Okay. So first, you've identified the benefit of hindsight
Mhm.
and also life experience. And so if you're in your teens or early 20s listening to this, your story is being written and you're just now starting to maybe get a peek at what your patterns look like and that cycle that Jen mentioned. But being older, we have the benefit of looking back and clearly seeing the patterns and clearly seeing how things operate within our lives and within our spiritual worldview. And so that brings us comfort. And this is the comfort that is offered today to those who don't have it is, hey, we've seen the patterns, and this is true of all humans. Maybe the pattern's going to look different for each person, but the fact is there's hope to have and to cling to that hope. And I really appreciated that you mentioned when you're in your inner like self-doubt or like you're in that fearful period of transition, it's so easy to focus on survival because that's where you are is how am I going to make it right? How am I going to put food on the table? Am I going to have a roof over my head? But what you talked about when you shifted to your spiritual worldview is a much bigger strategic viewpoint of how do I fit in to the bigger picture of things? And what do I know to be true? Or what do I decide I want to be true? Right. Because spirituality is, it's metaphysical. It's we don't have evidence, hard evidence to prove what we believe, but we are making a choice to believe in that. And so, out of curiosity, in those moments of difficulty for you in terms of accessing that hope in the beginning, was there like a key phrase or Bible verse or something else that you just clung to get you to that point of bridging the gap of your transition?
There are several that come to mind, and I've made several transitions, so they have served me multiple times. One of these is a funny phrase, but it's God is bigger than my 401k. And what that meant for me was there was a time in my life where I felt very strongly that God was calling me from Seattle back to North Carolina, and I wasn't sure why, and I did not want to go. And when I left that job, it didn't make sense to the world and it didn't make sense to my family. And the 401k sort of represents like future comfort and saving for our future based on what a company could do for us. And so that phrase came to me that I'm trusting that God is bigger than my 401k. So me walking away from that money is okay because whatever God has for me moving forward is going to be way greater than what I could have clung to from a company and what it would offer me. The other thing that comes to mind is there are times where I felt like I was jumping off a cliff because when we are taking a risk, there's not necessarily a safety net. Maybe there is to some degree. One of the things I would say is I'm not going to be homeless. I have so many friends that would take me in if everything fell to crap. That was a safety net for me, but it felt like I was taking a big leap of faith in my career. And so I could sense myself going to the edge and jumping off. And then I would say to myself, no matter what, I think this risk is what I'm supposed to do. I feel compelled to take this risk. Even if I'm wrong, God is still going to catch me.
Ooh, yes. Even if I'm wrong, God is still going to
Even
catch
if I'm
me.
wrong.
Oh,
I'm
I love
trying
that.
in all the ways that I know how to make decisions and be wise and live this life to the fullest. If I am making a mistake in this, it's okay because God is bigger than that and he will catch me.
So you're actually talking to that self-doubt voice of, am I wrong? Clearly, your intuition is very strong. It speaks to you very loudly. You've mentioned that you have a physical reactions sometimes to what your intuition's trying to tell you. But it's a whole other thing to actually act on what that intuition is telling you to do. And for the high achiever, because we're planners, we love our to-do lists, we like things to be nice and packaged right. But when you're jumping off that cliff, the belief foundationally also believes that I am following my intuition. I believe that this guidance comes from something bigger than me. And that even if I take a wrong step, that somehow it's going to get worked out at the end of the day. It's going to be not only fine, but better than fine.
Yes,
Oh
exactly.
my gosh. Okay. And that I think is really important because my audience, especially, they're so introspective that they will introspect themselves to not taking action because they're
Yeah,
worried about taking a wrong step and about messing up.
we're so afraid of being wrong, of making a mistake, of failing. Here's what I am noticing, and it's a lot of the work that I do, is that most of us are staying in our heads way too much. And so, what I encourage people to do is go deeper and step into the heart because we're analyzing and problem solving in our heads. And that we can get, it can go into all kinds of crazy spinning and it can become unproductive. And the decisions that we make and the way that we live our life doesn't always make sense here, right? It doesn't, I can't explain why this is a good decision.
Mhm,
And I wouldn't recommend this for anybody else because this is so personal for me and what
mhm.
I feel called to. And so when we're able to sink deeper into our heart, this is where wisdom lives.
I'm sorry. Say that
Wisdom
again. Say it again.
Wisdom lives in the heart and in our soul. Like wisdom is not here. This is intellect. We have to tap into our heart wisdom.
Yes. Yes.
And that's where that knowing comes. The confidence that I am able to get to in my decisions and the peace that I'm able to get to does not happen in my head. I leverage my head as the tool. Absolutely, it's part of it. But when I talk about knowing, it's a deeper.
Yeah.
It supersedes the brain and it
Mhm.
goes into the other parts of ourselves that are rich, our spirit, our soul, our heart.
Yes. And so you clearly are an expert level with tapping into that wisdom. For someone who's saying, "Yes, Jen, I know what you're saying is true and I want to do that, but I don't know how to do that." What is one maybe tiny step that they could take into
Yeah.
learning how to tap into that heart wisdom?
The most powerful thing we can do is start to trust our intuition. So our intuition was nurtured out of most of us. So we weren't, I'll just speak for myself. I wasn't taught to trust that inner voice. I wasn't, I was taught to trust authority, somebody outside of myself. And so I had to learn what intuition was and how it could protect me and serve me. And so if someone hasn't developed their intuition, the easiest way to do that is just to simply practice with very small things. Like the smallest things. Trust your intuition. What is your sense? And I'll often ask my husband if he says, we're trying to make a decision about something, I'll say, what does your intuition say? So
Oh,
it's an invitation to go deep and really challenge ourselves. Okay, what is that? Let me pause and check in with myself and see what my intuition might tell me, test it out,
oh, oh my
right?
gosh.
How did it go?
Yes, I love that so much. And that actually goes along with what you said earlier about don't do it by yourself.
Mhm.
So if you're in a place because you're not trusting your intuition because we were never taught how to trust our intuition. And so one of the tools you use is first make the choice that I'm going to partner better with my intuition and my wisdom. And in order to do that, I have to first, well, understand what it sounds like. And
Yeah.
in order to do that, maybe a great first step is partnering with someone else who can help me pull that out of myself. Now, I will caveat that by saying it should be a trusted person,
Yes.
right? Always do these exercises in spaces of complete trust. And if you can, what Jen mentioned earlier about the power behind having a coach is they're completely unbiased, right? Our friends are great resources and they're great tools and they love us and they want to encourage us. If you can find a coach that's a great fit, they are complete, like they don't care what the outcome is for you personally. Their only goal is to get you to self-actualize. And so having someone to say, hey, can you help me tap into my intuition? And oftentimes people can read things between the lines that we can't see ourselves. And so
Yeah.
helping them reflect back to you what they're seeing, what they're hearing. And oh my gosh, I love that so much. And that is such a practical, easy thing to do.
Yeah. We want to, there's a book called Nurture by Lisa Bevere. And this was a book that taught me that we should always be mentored and mentoring. So we always should be listening to those that are older and wiser and have more experience than us. And we should always be pouring into those that are, younger than us. And when we are trying to make great decisions, be wise, live our lives fully, we should be leveraging those that are wiser than us, that
Mm,
have had experienced more life than us, and ask the questions like, hey, this is the scenario. This is my challenge. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think about this? And a good listener, whether it's a friend, mentor, coach, will be asking questions back. How does that make you feel? What concerns do you have? What do you visualize when you imagine making that decision?
yes, yes.
And that helps us hone what's in us, because it goes beyond the thinking of, it feels, I have peace about this. I can't explain it. Okay, that's a good sign. Go in that
Yes.
direction.
Oh my gosh, this is so good. I could spend all day seriously talking to you about this stuff. We only have a few minutes left, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I have a couple more questions for you. So, one, because I've often found that heart-centered world changers have some type of, there's breadcrumbs sprinkled throughout their life that point them to their life purpose. So, do you have any memories from childhood or some type of harbinger that maybe at the time you were like, I don't know why this memory is sticking with me, or this is wild. I feel like there's meaning in this, but I don't know what it is. Do you have anything like that that kind of maybe prophesied the future work that you would be doing?
Well, two things come to mind. One, from the earliest age, I don't remember, but very early, and through my life, people have always trusted me. I have been a person that people would tell their life story to without being asked. They would just tell me things, and then they would almost catch themselves and say, I don't tell people these things. Why? I don't know why I feel like I trust you, but I do. And so I've always been in a position of holding big things for people and not sharing. I have always been about the sacredness of confidentiality and not exposing people, but really being a safe place for people, being a listener. And then I can remember when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after college, I was being interviewed for jobs. And I remember saying to one of the interviewers, I'd love to be on that side of the table.
Ooh.
It just came out of me, and I'd never really thought about it, but that took me into recruiting, which then naturally moved into coaching, because I've always been the one asking questions and seeking to understand the other person and helping them on their path.
Oh my gosh, it's so clear and it just oozes out of us, right? And we don't even realize it. Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Jen, I wish we could have more time together, but guys,
Me
if
too.
you want to follow her, she posts some really great stuff on LinkedIn at Jen Porter Coach. We're going to have links in the show notes. And Jen, would you mind sharing? I heard you have this amazing event coming up, and we want everybody to know about it.
Yeah, I do this thing called Purpose Reimagined. And this is a power hour for women who want to pause in their day and in their life to ask themselves the question, am I connected to my purpose? Do I need to realign my purpose in some way? Am I focused on what truly matters? And then figuring out, how do I get back on course? So it's like a purpose checkup. Now, the next one is happening October 30th. And I'll send you the link so people can find out about that. But I do these ongoing. So this is not the only one. And if people are listening to this after that, they can look for the next date. But the upcoming one is October 30th. But it's called Purpose Reimagined, and it's a group of amazing women who are heart-centered world changers, like you say, who really just they want their life to count and they want their work to matter.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to share that with folks. Guys, you just got a little taste of how amazing Jen is. And I'm so thankful for your time, Jen, today. I know it's really precious, but I could not do this podcast and not share with the world the amazing bright light that you are. And I'm personally so thankful for you. You have changed my life in so many ways. And so thank you so much. And to my guests, thank you so much for joining this really special conversation. My key takeaway is actually that we focus too much on our head and not enough on our heart. And that even though that intellect can benefit us, that sometimes it can hurt us as well. And so reintegrating that head with that heart, and Jen gave us some really amazing tools to start on that journey as well. And so again, we're going to have links in the show notes on where people can find Jen, because everybody's going to want to follow you. And guys, if you're looking for more resources, check out my life purpose exercise freebie on my website, www.mightysparrowcoaching.com. I have video prompts for you to help guide you, or you can check out my best-selling book, The Least of Us: How Your Imposter Syndrome Points to Your Greatest Power, available at all major book retailers. And I'm really excited to host my end-of-year event, which is focusing on shifting money mindset. It's November 5th, 12th, and 19th, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. Check out the links in our show notes. And until next time, humble warriors, please remember, the world needs who you were made to be. Thank you so much for joining us today on this journey to discover how you can harness your self-doubt and inner imposter to work for you. I love you guys. I'll see you soon. If you enjoyed this episode and would like some help overcoming your imposter syndrome, check out the free life purpose exercise on my website and subscribe to my blog. If you already know what your life purpose is and are ready to crush or harness your imposter syndrome, then you're going to love my best-selling book, The Least of Us: How Your Weakness Points to Your Greatest Power, available on Amazon and all major book retailers. Or you can hit me up at alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com to discuss private coaching or corporate and government training. That's ALANI@mightysparrowcoaching.com. Listen, there's only ever been one you, and there will only ever be one you. And you have a specific gift to give that the world desperately needs. Don't let your self-doubt be the thing preventing you from living your most joyful and impactful life. Until next time, I'm always cheering you on.